Welcome to Ride the Stream. It's Friday and it's another episode of Travis and I discussing an episode of Lost. We are in the first season and we are on episode number 18 entitled Numbers. Travis, how are you doing today?
Not too shabby. It's cold as all can be here in Baltimore. It's in the teens. The kids had a delay with school, and but I'm excited to talk about Hurley's first episode where we get flashbacks with him, um, and to hear your thoughts on discovering more of Hurley.
Definitely. Yep. This episode, which originally aired on March 5th of 2005, does focus on Hurley. And it's the first time. We've had a couple of repeat survivor uh, flashbacks, like Sun and Jun, and I think we've had a couple of Jack, couple of Kate, and others. So it's nice to finally get to Hurley. Hurley, who is always the nice guy, and seems to be able to always read the room, finally gets his day. So without further ado, if you're all right with it, Travis, I'll go ahead and get to our plot synopsis so we're all caught up on the same page. Just a quick reminder to everybody that's here with us, either watching us or listening. If you haven't seen the episode, there will definitely be spoilers ahead. So definitely take a moment, hit the pause button, go watch the episode, and then come back and join our discussion. Or if you've already watched it and it's been quite a while, you might want to go back and take another look. Because I think sometimes, this is one of those kind of quiet episodes. Like a lot happens, but it, you know, uh, can get kind of lost in the rest of the noise. So anyway, so here we go. In this episode, we finally get Hurley's backstory. He won the lottery about a year before, which should be cause for celebration. However, Hurley soon begins to wonder if the six numbers he used first. For example, his grandfather dies at the lottery winner press conference. At the funeral, the priest is struck by lightning. Hurley's brother's marriage falls apart. The house he bought for his mom catches fire before they move in. Hurley is falsely arrested when he is mistaken as a drug dealer. It was LA. And, oh, perhaps the plane crash that lands him and others on the island. See, while Hurley seems to have good luck, others around him are the recipients of bad luck. So in this episode, Hurley goes on two quests. During the flashbacks, he finds the wife of the first person who used the numbers. That person, Sam, kept a journal of all the bad things that happened around him while he continued to have good luck. In the end, Sam took his own life to stop the chain of bad luck for others around him. Is Hurley contemplating the same end? Back on the island, he decides to go find Russo because in her notes he finds the same six numbers. Imagine that. She tells him when he meets up with her that the same transmission that Sam had heard, a repetition of the numbers 16 years prior, is the same one that led her and her team to the island. She admits that she changed the transmission so no one else would hear the numbers. She and Hurley bond over the shared experience resulting from the numbers. It seems that what Hurley was seeking all along was validation that someone else agreed with his belief about the numbers being cursed or a bringer of bad luck. Side quest. Hurley secured a battery for Saeed so he can make a distress signal for the group that will be taking the raft off the island, at least so far that we know of. After Charlie shares that he was a heroin junkie and couldn't even go an entire trip without taking a hit, he asks Hurley if he will reveal a big secret. And because it seemed that Hurley was going to tell him while they were on their little adventure out in the forest. Um, but then they got waylaid by some gunshots. So Charlie kind of revisits the conversation, and Hurley says, "Okay, well, since you told me a secret, I'll tell you mine." So Hurley finally reveals that he is a multimillionaire who happens to be the majority shareholder of a Tustin box company. And for anybody that's forgotten, it's the same company that Locke works for. Small world. However, Charlie doesn't believe Hurley and basically says that, hey, man, we all have baggage, and kind of, conveying the message that, you know, everybody has bad days and we have bad things that happen, and it's how we get through them defines us and things like that. So anyway, Charlie just doesn't believe him now and walks away. In other Survivor news, Shannon worries about Saeed, who's going off with Jack and Charlie to find Hurley, and Hurley, who was trying to find the French woman. So, and we all know that Saeed came back kind of a mess after his first adventure and cross with the French woman. Sawyerism, he calls Walt short round. Um, and in a little skit or a little vignette, Sawyer gets a headache from reading as he sits guard at the raft. He has been probably self-nominated to become the guard. He's trying to read and there's hammering, and he's like, hey guys, yeah, make some more noise. And anyway, he's there to make sure that there no arsonists torch the raft. Not quite sure why he's got to be sitting there in the middle of the day with the same mission, but anyway, he says, forget this. He picks up his book and he leaves. That's Sawyer exits. Meanwhile, Sun and Kate are sitting nearby, and Sun is looking at June, thinking that, or, conveying that she doesn't know if he'll ever talk with her again. She knows that she's humiliated him through him not knowing that she could speak English and understand it. Maybe even kind of understanding that although all the things that he did for her, she was going to still leave him. So she also wonders if Jun will take the last spot on the raft and leave her behind. So big question marks there.
Yeah.
And lastly, the other kind of side story going on, Locke seeks Claire out for a project, which allows them to bond throughout the day. He asks her if she can do some sawing, and she's a little hesitant because she says, I'm 9 months pregnant. She says, I can barely waddle. And he's like, no, you'll be fine, and he helps her up. They go off into the jungle, and Locke is making something, and she is helping him by kind of whittling the pieces of wood that he needs. And in the evening, he's finally done. They're talking. She says that it's her birthday. And he says, but nobody knows. And she says, well, given the fact I'm single, I'm pregnant, we're here on an island, that's kind of small potatoes to everything else. And then she looks at the project, and of course, I don't know about you. I knew right away what it was once it was built. But it's upside down. So, when you're that close, maybe you just don't see the tree through the jungle, so to speak. But she asks what it is because she can't figure it out. He turns it over, and it is a little rocking cradle, and he tells her happy birthday. And that's just like, oh, I was well chuffed at that moment and thought that was so sweet. And that kind of concludes The episode, lots of little things happen throughout, but those are the big swashes of things going on through the episode. So I thought, we have kind of two standard questions. What is your favorite scene or standout moment from the episode? Our second question, who was the most interesting character from the episode? So all watchers and listeners, put your little thinking caps on and maybe down in the notes, think about those. And while we talk about what our feelings are, what our answers are, um, and then we'll have a third question, uh, kind of related specifically to the episode. So we invite you to leave a comment with your thoughts about the episode and what your favorite moment and character were. So, Travis, generally, what did you think of the episode as the person who has seen Lost 5 or 6 times? Um, was this an episode that you remembered? Did you remember kind of like high level things about Hurley, or did it just one of those quiet episodes that gets kind of lost in some of the bigger things happening in season one?
Yeah, right before we got on to record, I mentioned how I completely forgot about everything in this video, or this episode. Um, Forgot about Hurley going kind of AWOL and going on this hunt for Russo and um, him finding traps, stepping on traps, the bridge, um, the booby trapped bunker that Jack sets off. Um, just Hurley being completely, and Charlie calls him out on it in the episode, like you're acting completely opposite of who you are. You're happy go lucky, and now you're all gung ho, gonna go marching through the jungle, whatever. Um, Climbing across a rope bridge that looked like it only had one rope to hold it up on one side, maybe, and did not look sturdy at all. And I don't know. I was surprised because this episode feels like kind of like an adventure movie. Um, because you have these elements of, I don't know, it seemed very Indiana Jones like. Maybe it's the rope bridge that does that for me. And Sawyer's short round comment, tying back to Temple of Doom. Um, but there's just all these elements, and I think I like this episode a lot because there are some action sequences, but doesn't have the severity of intensity as previous episodes where you just like you get caught up in the moment. You're like you forget to breathe or
Yeah.
you breathe a sigh of relief when a scene is over. So this was, even though Hurley was, on this mission to find out about the numbers from the French woman. Learning about him was great because it adds another mystical element to the show
Mhm.
because the islands is unknown and all these people somehow are connected to the island by the broadcast of the numbers, which was broadcast from that she called it a radio tower.
Yeah, she called it a radio tower at Black Rock. Yeah.
Yeah, so um it's such a fun episode to watch. And some of the sequences between characters is great because even the small sequence, like with Shannon and Saeed, when she's worried about him, and he's like, "Oh, you're worried about me," and she's like, "Well, what if I am?"
Yeah.
And you can tell that in that moment he's recognizing like, "Oh, she is concerned about me," and I think that maybe highlights the bond between them. Um, so stuff like that is really nice to see, um, and I think that kind of adds to why Lost is so successful because you have all of these like 1 minute scene or 30-second encounter, what have you, but the connection seems so genuine.
Mhm.
They just feel like you're right there with them or so I loved watching this one again. As a first time viewer, waiting so long to get our first Hurley episode, what were your thoughts on everything that happened? Like, was there anything that stuck out to you, or just as a whole, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I was totally surprised that Hurley had won the lottery and that he was living in LA. But it seems logical to explain how he ended up in Australia and then eventually on the plane. While you were talking, I was just thinking back to the prior episode where we do have the little Easter egg that Hurley's on the television. But the scene that they show on television is not the any of the flashback scenes that we saw in this episode. So that means whatever he was doing on television you know, in Jun's episode last week, oh, we don't know why. So I'm kind of like, well, that's a big question because now I'm curious, like, why, you know? And on rewatching, I picked up on the whole box company that I didn't pick up before, and I was like, oh my gosh, small world. Um,
All
the
those
other,
connections,
I
all those
know,
connections.
and I love all that, and doing these deep dives each week is really helpful for making more of those connections and, things that we've talked about before, where when this was originally aired, you would have had people around the water cooler talking about it and making those connections, and everybody would pick different things. And again, that's why, we're here today is because, we both like the series and we're getting to do those kind of connections. Um, I I found the theme of luck and curses, good luck versus bad luck, and um, that situations are what you make it, is kind of, one of the lessons learned is that, it's not necessarily good luck or bad luck. It's what you make of it. And I thought that was a really good theme to explore. Um, and what I picked up this time that I didn't pick up on the first time through was the whole conversation between Locke and Claire about it being her birthday
Yeah.
and how, her birthday was small in comparison to everything else going on. And I get that because there's times when, I don't know, like on social media, I might want to post something. Um, But then I feel it's not right because I'm reading the room and everybody's, dealing with like, for example, um, the fires recently in Southern California, the Pacific Palisades and the Eaton fire over in Pasadena and Altadena, and third fire. Can't remember the name of it, but you know, you and I know a lot of people in SoCal. We have a lot of comic book friends and things like that. And it didn't feel right to say, hey, look at me, look at, something good happened in my life necessarily. Um, when all this other stuff is going on. And I felt that it would have belittled some of, or would have felt like it was petty versus other things that are going on in the world. And that, it's okay to like, I can have my own little celebration. It doesn't have to be broadcast out to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that it, in the end, um, being sensitive to what others are going through and knowing when the right time is to kind of toot your own horn or, convey a good news. Um, or maybe, you know, just being supportive to other people, in their time of need. Um, I also thought more about the fact that, Hurley comments early in the first or second flashback, how he wants to do nice things for his family because of what he's put them through. And I wasn't connecting that he had actually spent some time maybe depressed or in an institution to kind of help him get through some issues that he was dealing with. And this is how he finds out about the numbers, is through this guy, Leonard, who is probably just saying the numbers over and over or whatever. Um, but the fact that, Hurley's gone through some tough times, and, he wins all this money and he just wants to do nice things for others and to be helpful to others. And that really, his personality really isn't all that different from what he is on the island. And when he was thinking more about, what he was doing for others, or, how he's making things better on the island, he wasn't focused on numbers or anything else. And he probably hadn't thought about it until I saw the numbers on the paper. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, this appears to create a chain reaction of things going on. When in fact, it's probably a coincidence of something, and it's what you take. It's like you can read numbers and read lots of meaning into them. You can be in, a believer of numerology, for instance. Um, or you can take what happens as, hey, I did this action and this is a result. This is cause effect type perspective. And I kind of like that about Locke when he says, um, when Claire asks him if he believes in luck, and he says, I believe in a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I just like that. And I think at the end of the day, you can believe in a lot of different things. And I think part of Hurley being kind of cut out by Charlie is because Charlie started calling him crazy, and started belittling him, instead of like maybe giving him the benefit of the doubt. He even interrupts him towards the end of the episode where Hurley wants to go ahead and tell him, and Charlie just keeps interrupting him, which is kind of sad because I think that, Hurley has things to say, things to contribute, and sometimes people forget. And so I think you also get that perspective of Claire deciding that, hey, this is the time to stay quiet about my birthday. People don't need to make a fuss. And then look, she got this really beautiful homemade, rocking cradle from Locke, who
Yeah.
wanted to spend time with her because, she's struggling just like everyone else. She's got gaps in her memory, which create kind of an identity crisis for her because she's having issues connecting things. So, really good kind of psychological episode that on the rewatch really picking up this time around, and picking up more clues, and with our deep discussion really kind of making more connections, and of course thinking about how well the writers have really mapped this out, and bring a lot of things together in each episode while leaving a lot of
Yeah.
things unanswered.
Yeah, and that scene with Claire and Locke, she trusts him enough to tell him that she was going to give up the baby for adoption.
Yeah.
And, Locke, you know, ponders it for a second or two and just admits that that must have been a really difficult choice. And, he doesn't question her choice or anything like that. He just, um, it's amazing how um, thoughtful or quiet support for someone can be so beneficial.
Mhm.
Um, so I really enjoyed that scene. Um, and just it highlights, I liked getting to know a little bit more about Claire. I mean, we're not really learning more about her that we haven't already seen before, but her being selfless and not wanting to highlight her birthday, you know, willing to help Locke, thanking him for giving her something to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then with Locke, he's possibly the ultimate enigma, but
Oh yeah.
he seems like such a good soul. Like he seems to have like Hurley. I think we talked about this before. They seem to have like such good intentions. They have different approaches. And obviously Hurley in this episode goes to the extreme, disregarding maybe his own safety.
Hmm.
Like when he steps on the booby trap, they're like, hey, don't move or that giant spiky thing's gonna fall on you. And he's just like, don't worry, I'm spry. It's
Yeah.
just she jumps out of the way, it misses him. Um, so I think the balance of this episode's leans a little heavier into like um fun and kind of some heartfelt connections rather
Mhm.
than leaning too much further on the intense side, which is why I think I like this episode a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and in no way diminishes any other episode, but um, I think this is a good spot, and maybe that's why they pushed this episode so far away to like kind of have a nice break. Um, but yeah, I think all of the connections that we were seeing, um, I I don't know if there's trying to think of other shows that might produce equal connections. And the first one that comes to mind is one of my favorites, which is Fringe, which is allowed. It does a similar thing where they are allowed to kind of organically connect bonds, and it doesn't seem forced or rushed necessarily. Um, so when you see like Claire and Locke together, it seems like they are genuinely, Locke is genuinely interested in like, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, maybe I can help you with recovering your memories, or maybe you can help me with this project I'm working on. And it doesn't seem like there's any ulterior motive behind it. Um, and even like when Claire asks about where he got glue, and he tells her he made it from rendered animal fat, and she tells him, "Oh, maybe you should be on one of those shows where you help fix up people houses." And he responds, "Nah, I don't think so." Like
Yeah.
it's like he doesn't try to like sugarcoat. Oh yeah, sure, maybe. He's like, nah, no. Basically saying no, that's not my that's not my jam. So,
Yeah.
so I appreciate that stuff too.
Yeah. I kind of feel like that, a lot of the things that he knows he could be giving to other people, like, I don't know, using the glue to help with, I don't know, like, debris installation, if they actually build shelters, because they're now a month into being on the island. So some of the things he comes up with, it's like, yeah, that could have some wide usage, at the two different camps. I also noticed that in that scene, when they're chatting during the afternoon, and she thanks him for the opportunity to not be thinking about some of the problems that she has. Um, and he says, well, bits and pieces, I'm good with putting bits and pieces together. So I think that while he is being altruistic with helping her, and just kind of keeping her mind busy and being a friend to her, I think he is maybe trying to find out some information to see if she happens to remember anything about Ethan or the others. But he doesn't push it, you know.
No,
So it's almost like, planting the seed so you can sow it later, similar to what the writers do with the show, themselves. The fact that they plant a lot of different seeds and then sow them, down the road in episodes to come. Um, so I figure, you know, uh, maybe something will come of that down the road.
Yeah. Um, because wherever she was, I mean, I think you've discussed the possibility of the connection to the comic book where there's like some type of lab or something like that. So,
Yeah,
whatever is Locke thinking ahead of, like, well, was she taken somewhere where they would be able to care for a pregnant person?
yeah,
And what does place like that look like, and what kind of, I don't know, supplies do they have and stuff like that? So maybe there is a inkling of John trying to, you know, build that bond and see if that helps her communicate or process what's happened to her in a way where she can remember. I don't know, but it's interesting.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
So I guess we can kind of get into um actually I think I kind of like to take no, we'll do this. I'm going back and forth. So we'll go ahead and do the first question.
Okay.
So your favorite scene or standout moment. I'm assuming you probably have a few. So do you have a few?
So this
Or do you have one?
I went away from my the last handful of episodes. I've been writing a list of favorite scenes, possible characters. This one I went completely blank. Um, and thinking about the episode, there are two scenes that stand out. One is the scene where Claire opens up to Locke towards the end about her birthday, about was going to give up her baby for adoption and not even having a name picked out because she hasn't thought of it. Um, I appreciate just the honest, back and forth between the two.
Mhm,
Um, but I think the one that stands out the most is Hurley at gunpoint with Rousseau, and he's just wanting to ask her about the numbers, and he doesn't care that she's pointing a rifle at him because when she says he doesn't know about the numbers, he just gets pissed off and he loses it. And he's just like, he starts just rambling about like the monster, and maybe it's just a giant giraffe or,
yeah.
um, and all this other stuff. And he just says that he just needs answers. And as he's, I think one of the reasons I like it is because as he's losing it, Danielle like lowers her rifle. And I think it's because she recognizes his like manic state that he's in and like the frustration and feeling or seemingly lost in this effort. And so she has like this sympathy in her eyes. And so she just goes on and talks about what she knows about the numbers. And I think I even wrote it down verbatim because I really appreciate that she recognizes that he is struggling. And
Mhm,
even though she's been alone, I know she had the interaction with Saeed, but she's been alone for 16 years or 17 years. And she recognizes probably the struggles that she's had alone
mhm,
and what she sees in Hurley needing to find out about what these numbers mean. And so she goes on to say, um, our ship picked up a transmission, a voice repeating those numbers. We changed course to investigate. After we shipwrecked, my team continued to search for a transmission source. It was weeks before we found the radio tower up by the Black Rock, and then a sickness came and went back to the tower and changed the transmission. And then she goes on to say, well, if the numbers were what brought me here, ultimately they are what brought you here.
Hmm.
So, yes, you're right. The numbers are cursed. And seeing the sense of relief on Hurley's face
Hmm.
is so emotional because he is sh like you mentioned before the numbers came up in this episode, he seemed like he was helping and happy-go-lucky, and then the numbers approached him and it was like a wave of panic or
Yeah.
like I don't know what it was that made him so panicked to find out what they mean, and that someone actually believed him and agreed with him. And he just gives her this giant bear hug, and like it looks like he's gonna like tackle her, and
I know she's so
um
small compared to him.
yeah, so I love that scene. I think it kind of resembles um well, one, it brings Hurley back to being his, I think, you know, I think it brings him down from this like ledge where he was just like on the edge
Yeah.
of uncertainty, and it also highlights like what kind of person Danielle is,
Hmm.
that she's out to survive regardless of who else is on the island, and she's willing to like just help in that moment. And um so yeah, it's a fantastic scene. um I I can't remember the actress's name. I know we've talked about her before, but
Mira
when she's on
Furlan.
screen, I'm sorry.
Mara Furlan.
Yes. When she is on screen, it it's just hard not to be like captivated by like her performance.
She's just so there. Rest in peace to her because she's passed away. But um, yeah, she just has an understated um ability to encapsulate her character. And even though it's only for a short period of time, for me, like all the memories of the episode with her and Saeed in it all come rushing back. All of her frailty, and her sense of loss and her, you know, the loss of her son, the loss of her other companions from the team, her loss on the island. Um, just as she says in that scene, she lost everything and everyone that she cared about, you know. And you certainly feel it. I mean, it just comes across in her stance, her look. Um, and yet there's a ruggedness about her, an ability to survive, in spite of all the things that have happened. So, it's like, you question whether Hurley is like maybe thinking he might be becoming a bit unhinged by the situation, just as much as, she has thought. And, it leads back to a question of whether, Saeed says, she was insane. It's ramblings of someone who doesn't have complete use of her facility, mental capacities anymore. But I think that when you look at that scene and you balance it out, I think that you have to relook and reevaluate, um, judgments about different people. And just because you don't necessarily understand it doesn't mean that there isn't rationalization and a sense of um, sanity. That's, we all have different degrees of sanity and insanity that we deal with every day. So I just think, I don't know that she's crazy from being alone for 16 years, um, any more than Hurley's, crazy because he saw those six numbers again, and all the experiences come crashing back to him in all these flashbacks. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you have a favorite scene?
Yeah, I actually wrote down I had two. The exact same two as you. Uh, so I do feel like while we have some resolution for Hurley and some relief for Hurley in that moment when he converses with Rousseau, I also think that there's a similar quiet solution and bonding with Locke and Claire when he presents her with the cradle for her baby. And just all the subtlety of their conversation and the quietness of both conversations. Two different, very situations, but at the same time, kind of resolving similarly.
Yeah.
And just really kind of, book ending some of those, some of that line of wonderment. Um, well, further questions because Claire hasn't regained all of her memories. Locke is still an enigma. And of course, right at the very end, we hear this humming, and then we have a close up of, I don't know, I took it to be the capsule that Locke and Boone have been trying to uncover.
Yeah, with
And
the
along
hatch.
the side, yeah, are those six numbers. And I thought about the fact that because I always have to remind myself that just because what we're seeing on screen, not all the other survivors know the same information that we know.
Yeah.
I don't know that Locke knows about those numbers. Now, he seems to know a lot, so maybe he does, but I will be very curious what transpires with regards to those numbers, and whether he will find out or know, and people will start making connections of why that group of people are together on that island.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that I think their destinies were such that they were all meant to be on that island for some reason. Don't know why, but it just seems like all the dots are leading to um, them being there for a particular reason. And that they all have, as we've said, all the stories are interlocking. We see, people crossing paths, and wondering if they're all going to eventually kind of connect the dots for themselves on the island and why they're
Yeah.
there. And thank goodness that Danielle changed the transmission, but it does make you kind of wonder. Just now, I'm thinking, are there others that are on the island in other places? We don't know how big the island is. So, are there additional people that, don't know about all these other little groups of people that are on their kind of side of the island? So, um, it's kind of funny looking at the map because they did kind of show the map again, and there was like mountain ranges, and I immediately thought of um, the mask from Watchmen. Rorschach, is it Rorschach? Rorschach
Yeah.
that has the kind of changing mask. Um, and I don't know, that came to my mind when I saw the look of the map. It just kind of made me think of the changing um splotches and things like that on his mask.
Yeah, and Saeed said that the territory, I, I don't know if it was
Dark
where Russo
territory.
lived. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was Russo called it the dark territory. And his mask, has those dark shifting
Yeah,
um
that's true.
bits. So that's an interesting take on the map. I think that Russo's character, um, even though she's been there so long, she's not afraid to say, like, I don't know what some of the stuff is.
Mm.
Like she doesn't technically know about anyone else on the island, or she said that, even though she's heard whispers. Um, So there always is the unknown in these layers that we're unraveling as we watch. But the I always enjoy like having that bits of information that some people know, but not everyone knows. Um, because it almost makes you like, oh, I'm in on this secret that Locke and Boone are trying to uncover. So I can't imagine, or I should say, I don't recall what Locke does know about the numbers, but he's almost gotten to the point where it's like, should we just assume that he knows everything because he has all of these skills and like Claire's just like, you made glue? Like, how did you
Yeah.
like so
Hey, getting a
fascinating character.
hallucinogenic from tree sap. So,
Yeah.
and other things in the jungle for Boone. So, not too surprised.
Yeah, it's um yeah, he's fascinating. And
So,
and again, it's interesting getting Hurley's backstory to add that kind of mythical element and the fact that like the numbers were being broadcast from the island and it's like what do they mean? Like why was that transmission ever put out there? And is there a curse? Like I don't
mhm,
know. Eh, I, so, and my memory stinks enough to where I can't remember if it's if it's actually a curse or not. So that benefits me. So,
yeah. Well, leading to the second question, who was the most interesting character from the episode, um, in your mind? Or for
um,
you, I should say. For you, who was the most interesting character?
I mean, Hurley getting his first episode is a pretty big deal. Um, and his persistence is just, and him being unafraid of like crossing that bridge. Like, dude, it'll be fine. Like, you guys just stay there. I'll be fine. I feel like it has to be him. I could. I'm also thinking of Russo because she's in it. She's great.
Mhm.
Um, Locke and Claire, uh, their interactions pop up. But I guess I would say Hurley,
Mhm.
um, just because he goes sideways in this episode where he's just lost and being someone that we don't recognize from earlier in the season. So, and seeing that he's capable of doing plenty of things. Like he said, he's spry, you know. He's made a comment earlier in the season to Walt where he says he was somewhat of a oh, they're talking about
Did he say he was like,
somewhat of a warrior.
yeah, he said yeah, a warrior. Don't know
So
what
he's
that necessarily means.
yeah, so there's a lot to him that we don't know about. So it's interesting that we didn't really learn anything different about his character, just of the what's happened to him. So I'm interested to see more about, well, what does that mean to be a warrior and like what else is he capable of doing other than like dodging death traps and walking across bridges that will soon collapse. So,
Yeah.
was it easy picking for you with a most interesting character of this episode?
Yeah, I felt basically the same list as you, and I have Hurley at the top of the list because I do feel that we had a real exploration of him. We get, backstory about him, and I think the things that we believed about him are kind of confirmed through his backstory. That he is a person that cares about others, and we've seen that through the entire season so far. So I feel like this episode shows that he's caring a lot, he's thinking about a lot, but he is also the person that we are led to believe that he is. Where we have
Yeah.
questions like about, well, who's Locke really? We still have questions about that. We still have questions about Kate and what she's done. We still don't have really a definitive answer there either. But I feel like this episode confirmed our belief in Hurley and his role on the island, what he's taken. I kind of chuckle a little bit because I think in the last episode or the one before, um, when Hurley is playing backgammon with Walt, and Walt is like, "Well, you owe me this," and Hurley walks away and says, "I'll pay you back." Like, well, yeah, of course he will. He's got the money, and it's probably growing since he's, been gone because he doubled it in just, a few short months. So, um, yeah, I think it needs to be Hurley, you know.
Yeah, he and the way he talked to Walt about like, oh yeah, you'll get it.
Yeah.
Like he was so confident about it. And I want to say I might have touched on like, well, why was he so confident about paying back like $83,000?
Yeah.
Um and just knowing who he is, it's like he will pay. Like he'll definitely pay Walt. Um and and I want to say Hurley might be the only person. Is he the only person that we can truthfully say, yeah, he seems like a legit good dude because there's so much uncertainty about what others have done.
I think so.
Um, and I mean, we saw Sawyer kill someone. Um,
Yeah.
Kate assisted to rob a bank, but is that why she
She,
was arrested?
and she has supposedly killed someone. She's got the little toy plane, so there's still a lot of unanswered questions around her. She was married briefly. You know, she does convey that. Yeah, I feel out of all of them, I feel like there's more to explore about Jack, Saeed, Locke. Um, I don't know about Boone. I think Boone and maybe more about Shannon. I don't think we know a lot about her, and we haven't had an episode really on her as much as Boone.
Yeah,
Um, but I feel like sort of I hate, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I feel like what you see is what you get when you look at Hurley and the way that he acts, that there isn't a deception there. And maybe even Claire too. Like they're not they aren't there, they don't have deception as part of their backstory like
yeah,
Locke does. Like I really feel like you could, line people up and say, well, they're on this side because we still don't know a whole lot about them versus, we know a lot more about Hurley and we kind of know that we know what we're going to get with Hurley. Hurley's going to be there to, you know, be there to help with the welfare of others, you know.
yeah.
So,
And that's a great point. Yeah, Claire, I think, yeah, you're right. She's probably equally up there with Hurley.
and I think even
'Cause
Charlie, even though we keep learning a bit more about Charlie and like, we know stuff about Charlie, but I also feel that um I feel like we know what we're going to get with Charlie as well. So I kind of feel like those three. And if you notice with those three, Locke has gone light-handed with how he's kind of interacted and dealt with them. I think Walt too. Okay, he's a young boy, but I think those four, I almost feel like how Locke interacts with people helps you to kind of understand if there's something more. But that said, then you got the juxtaposition of Kate and Sawyer, where he's giving them coffee, and it
Yeah.
seems like everything's, easy peasy there. But I think they all had their secrets, you know.
Yeah, and as I'm thinking about it, I mean, Michael seems like a pretty straight-laced guy where he was put in that position of not being able to be a parent. Like that wasn't his choice for Walt to not be in his life. So I mean, he seems pretty like what we see is what we get because he's a struggling parent and he doesn't necessarily know how to keep his cool when he gets frustrated around his kid and but he recognizes that that's not okay when he
Yeah,
talks to Walt. So that Walt, I think, understands like, hey, you shouldn't have to deal with that. Like,
yeah,
um, so maybe I jumped the gun by saying Hurley was was the only one. There's a lot of I guess the mystery kind of overwhelms me sometimes because there's just a lot of unknown.
yeah,
Um, but I do think they've done a good job at establishing um where these characters have come from to a degree.
mhm,
So yeah, I'm glad that we could dive into Hurley and finally understand like something about his past.
yeah,
Um, and I remember watching this the first time, and I was like, I would have never guessed in a million years that like curse numbers or some kind of curse would have been included into the show. I know that they've had like the sci-fi or fantasy elements with the potential you referenced the potential of a kaiju
yeah,
um and but just I never would have thought like a curse, but I think there have been references to like is the place magical in some way or I
mm,
mean think Lost or Locke is referenced it as special. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised.
yeah,
Um, and I shouldn't really be surprised since I've seen the show a few times, but it, um, but it is magical. It is great to watch.
yeah, yeah. I had to kind of chuckle too because um, Saeed, Jack, and Charlie go to catch up with Hurley in the jungle near where Russo's bunker was. And at one point, Saeed says, "Oh, I recognize this area," and I'm like, "You recognize this area? It does not look familiar." I thought that was actually pretty funny, but I'm sorry. Did I scare you with that? Yeah.
Yeah, and even like when like they come upon like the bridge and Jack's just like, "Bridge? You didn't say anything about bridge." And he's like, I haven't been here before." Like
Yeah.
it's like just so it's like little moments like that where there's just like this uh reality check of like, "Oh, we are discovering new parts of the island that we haven't seen before," which is kind of cool. Um
Yeah,
I don't know
that
if I
that
would have wanted
scene
to cross
showed.
that bridge.
Yeah, when that scene came up, I was like, "Whoa, there's a bridge here, and there's kind of a canyon." And I was like, "Oh wow, we have seen mostly oceanfront jungle
Yeah.
and a little waterfall and a swimming hole around it, and that's been it. So it was almost kind of like shocking to see kind of an open, rugged place on the
Yeah.
island. So I was kind of taken aback by that. I was like, whoa, whoa, where'd this come from? How does this relate to the rest of the island? It always kind of makes me think of shifting places. I know there's stories like that where you can walk and if you go back, it shifts. It's almost like you go through. I don't know, like a portal or something. You try to go back through that
Yeah.
portal and it'll be someplace else. It's not the same. I think Star Trek did that back in the 60s in one of their episodes. I know when I thought about cursed numbers, I actually thought a minute about the franchise Final Destination and the order of things. And I mean, that's a lot different, but kind of the idea of, cause and effect. And when something gets skipped, it's almost like destiny's got to go back and make a correction. So I don't know. That just kind of like came into my mind. So I did look up to see when the first movie came out, and that was in 2000. And then the sequel came out in 2003. The third one came out in 2006, which would have been about a year after this episode. So I don't know if there was any sort of influence at all, or kind of like looking at those two films and thinking of a concept around the numbers or not. So
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I don't know. But going back to the landscape, maybe that's why this episode feels so different because it introduces this new part of the island. And it's kind of just fun to be able to explore with the characters.
yeah,
Um, I think it's hard to, I don't think there are a lot of shows where it's just like, oh, I feel like I'm with those characters. Um, so it's definitely something I appreciated seeing.
yeah. I'm kind of hoping, just kind of looking ahead. Um, I do hope that they will decide to try to investigate a little bit more of the island. Um, I'm feeling slightly restless uh, of them being just kind of in that general area. And so that's what, I do know that, because I got through episode 21 and obviously even if I hadn't gotten there, they're building a raft. So that means, some people are going to try to get off the island. So I could see, how my feeling of somewhat restlessness of not knowing and thinking that there's probably more out there, maybe more resources and things like that, is kind of leading to the push. Obviously, Michael wants to get Walt off the island. He wants to get back to something normal or create a normal environment for his son.
Yeah.
Get him back in school and things like that. Get him to a stable life. Um, so it's interesting that I'm kind of feeling a little bit of that, based on seeing a little bit more of the island and wanting to see more and being a little restless about kind of either being in the cave where it's dark or out on the beach where it's beautiful and looking at the ocean, um, but not really knowing a whole lot more about the island. And
Yeah.
very curious about what is this black rock? What is this tower? Because again, Russo told Hurley about it, but that doesn't mean that our communications officer, Saeed, knows about the tower. Because I'm thinking back and I don't think she told him about the tower. I think he thinks that there's something out there at the Black Rock. So I'm kind of feeling like they really need to get to Black Rock and see what's up with that. Because if she was able to change the transmission, then Saeed should be able to go out there and maybe make a shift in the transmission, right? Because those
Yeah.
numbers were broadcast, and Sam picked that up 16 years ago. So why couldn't they do a shift the message?
Yeah. The only thing I can think that Danielle told Saeed, because I think he was asking about the power source that was sending the signal. And I think she might have referenced that. I think she said, like, quote, like, they control it now or something like that. But I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if she actually referenced radio tower or she might have
Yeah.
just said, like, the power source or I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
yeah, I can understand your thoughts on like wanting to like see what else is. And I wonder now after this episode, after seeing more of the island that they hadn't seen before, if it will coax them into just exploring more to see what's out there.
Yeah. Something that I completely forgot to bring up as we're starting to probably wrap up is that when Hurley and Rousseau are talking, and he gets pretty flustered and, he's looking for answers. Did you pick up, man, breathes in a cat hair. That's always pleasant. Um, did you pick up on the fact that he said, I know no one's looking for us? Did you pick up on that? He was like,
Yeah,
nobody's looking for us, you know, and because he must know that that they landed way off course and there's been no rescue. But I thought that was very interesting that he said they're not looking for us.
yeah, it's an interesting choice of words, and
Yeah,
maybe it's I don't know if it's the assumption of like, well, shouldn't they have been rescued by at this point, being a month out or so?
yeah.
Um, so maybe that's just frustrations amplified
Hey,
there. I don't know, but it is an interesting way to put it
and
for
since
sure.
this is Lost and we know our writers, we're learning
Yeah,
about the writers. That's not an empty, that's not a filler. There's something behind all that.
yeah, that conversation is so impactful,
Hmm.
because even though he's losing his shit because he's so frustrated, it makes you wonder like everything he's saying is making sense. And he's like, all of these things seem interconnected.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like he's looking for more information to just try to finalize and tie it all together to figure out, okay, what does it all mean? Um, which I think is us as the viewer is like, I feel you, Hurley.
Yeah,
I'm right
yeah. Kind of
there.
doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, let's see. So we've got our character. Is there any other scenes that you want to explore before we kind of wrap it up for this week?
Um, I think that one thing that I did notice is just it kind of made me laugh. Um, so Charlie, when he's trying to at the end get Hurley to admit, like, hey, you know, what happened today? He he calls it. He says he asks about quote what inspired this little quest.
Hmm.
And quest, I just is how they used to describe Lord of the Rings and their adventure as the quest, and I like that little
Yeah.
reference. So that's I think all the other things that we've touched on are all of my highlighted points. So that was the one that I was like, that I like that. I
Yep.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Anything else that we haven't touched on that you?
No, just that when Hurley is sitting there at night, just prior to them talking about the little quest, that Hurley is sitting there looking at the fire, and then it kind of, pull the camera lens pulls out a little bit more. And Charlie comes to sit down and he says, I know food is scarce, but and you see that Hurley says, well, when there's let me know where there's a laundromat, because he's basically kind of wrapped his shirt around this long stick. He has it over the fire, and that's his way of
Yeah,
trying to, dry his shirt. Not that, maybe do that during the day, but yeah, I thought that was pretty humorous. So,
yeah, yeah. No,
um,
this is a great episode.
yeah. Uh, an unresolved is Saeed finds a picture of Nadia in bunker
Mm,
wreckage. So I'm kind of curious whether he's going to let that go, since now he's got an, he and Shannon are kind of heating up. What's going to happen there with
yeah,
regards to the past with Nadia, and he's got the picture. So I'm like, are you going to keep the picture? Are you going to, burn the picture and just kind of, put that to the back, in your past and just look forward? I mean, because he said that, but now he's actually got a picture. So I'm
yeah.
kind of curious what's going to happen there.
No, that's a good point. And I guess another option would he talk to Shannon about it?
Yeah, maybe.
Um, like she was open with him in the last episode about wanting to start her new life on the island with him. So maybe that means being open about the past too.
Yeah, maybe so. All right. Well, in case our viewers haven't done so already, and like our content and want to keep apprised of when we have new episodes every Friday, is when we drop a new episode. But just in case, definitely hit the subscribe button, notification bell. You only get one little notification each week when we drop a new episode, so it won't clutter up the notifications. And definitely leave a comment, or if you don't feel like leaving a comment, but you want to let us know that you've been enjoying our conversation about this week, leave a series of numbers in the comments. So we know you've been here, and that you've listened to the end. Uh, and thank you so much for joining us this week. Next week, we revisit Locke.
Ooh,
So we should get a little more info about Locke.
can't
So,
wait for that.
yeah.
Oh, and if anyone does leave a comment, uh, if it goes beyond this episode, just make sure to leave like a little spoiler alert on your comment, just so that anyone new to the show, particularly Michelle, doesn't get spoiled.
Yep.
And we thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think it's a wrap for this week. We hope you're all doing well, and look forward to having you join us again next week. Thanks so much.